Okay, we are back to talk about the last six episodes of the first season, Homicide: Life on the Street. That will be episodes 4 through 9. As we mentioned last week, this show is created by Paul Attanasio based on Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets by David Simon. This first season ran in the winter and spring of 1993. Continuing on some of the stories from the first three episodes, the last six episodes of season one continues an investigation of the Adina Watson murder case, as well as several cases around a drug dealer who tortures a young woman, a gang initiation that ends up becoming a murder, a Chinese political refugee who is murdered, police officer shot in the eye and eventually is blinded from that injury, and several other cases that the detectives take on. Meanwhile, in their more personal lives, Detective Bolander and medical examiner Blythe go on a date. Bolander tries to bond with her son. Howard and Bayless both attempt to give up smoking. Lewis is building a Mustang Cobra. Lieutenant Girardello tries to protect his squad from asbestos in the building, and all sorts of other things that are happening here, interspersed throughout these cases. Probably most the most relevant place to start would be with the Adina Watson case. It's
Yeah.
sort of the three or four episodes we get where this is still being discussed and still being investigated, culminating in episode 6, Three Men and Adina, the name of the episode. So this case started in the second episode of the season. We see it through the sixth, but then we really don't. And so I guess we sort of talk about this episode of that case in general.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting how this is kind of the big case and the through line of the season. Um, and certainly part of that is the fact that it's the murder of this young girl. Um, she 11 or
Yeah, I
something,
think 11.
12 or something like that. And it's Bayless's first case, and they don't solve it, or it's still open. Case is still
Yeah.
open, which is not unrealistic by any means, but in terms of television, kind of surprising, you know.
Yeah, that's the innovative, if we want to use that word, innovative part, that there is no resolution to it, and at least seemingly through the rest of the first season, there is no return to it either.
Well, after this episode that you mentioned, Three Men and Adina, which is really almost the entire episode, is the interrogation of the character Risley. Is that his name?
Yeah,
Risley Tucker,
Grizzly
played
Tucker.
by
Yeah,
Moses Gunn, who they generally refer to as the Araber.
yeah.
I don't know if that language is at all culturally insensitive. I don't think I'd ever heard the word before I watched the show. Um, he's got a fruit cart, and I guess at least
Mhm.
in Baltimore, this is the term that they use. Had you ever heard this term before? I legitimately had not.
I had not heard this term, so it was interesting to see in this whole episode, Three Men and Adina, that they talk to him and say, "This has nothing to do with anything ethnic, right? You're not Arab, you're not Arabian, so why do they call you an Arab?" So no, I had not heard this term before.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with the horse because I think there's horse involved.
That's right, horse
Maybe
cart with fruit. Yeah.
maybe it's I don't even know about horses. I don't know if this was unplanned. Anyway, that's not the most relevant thing, but that term is there, and yeah, they do talk about it doing on the show. But so yeah, I mean, this episode was really powerful. You mentioned that it's on Rolling Stone's list of greatest episodes of all time. I believe Alan Sepinwall put it there. Um, what was it, like 25 or something?
Yeah, so Rolling Stone released a list of their best TV episodes of all time this week and had this one at number 25.
And I noticed that put it at one place above the BoJack Horseman episode, Fish Out of Water. I do disagree. I do kind of think that BoJack episode is better, but we don't need to go on a tangent about that. Ryan hasn't seen BoJack Horseman.
No, no,
Um,
no, I'm not. Go look at the list though. It's great. It's a really good read. I will say that.
yeah, it is a good list. And also, for what it's worth, I've written an article on that BoJack Horseman article episode. You
Okay.
can find it on tvobsessive.com if you want to read it. Anyway, that's the side we're talking about homicide. Um, so yeah, pretty much the whole episode is taken up with the interrogation. They're trying to get a confession. It doesn't work. Thoughts? I mean, do you think? I guess one question we could ask is coming out of this, is your feeling that he is guilty and they just can't pin, can't get in,
Yeah,
or
simply put, yes, I do believe that he is. I'm curious to know if you felt the same way. I thought this was following the very formulaic, they're doing the good cop, bad cop routine. They're throwing every strategy they can against the wall. And it seems like towards the end of the episode, he's really opening up and struggling, and he's starting to say things, admit things, and talk about where she was and last time she was at the barn. And it looks like we're almost on the cusp of something, and then we don't get it. He doesn't ever confess. And that was again sort of the newness of, well, the cop show, you have to do all the work and then you get the confession at the end. And so I thought we were going to, and then a sort of rug pulled out. We didn't get that at all. And he's set free.
yeah, it's kind of set up, that expectation of watching a show like this, that you're going to get there and you're going to get that kind of satisfaction and conclusion, and you don't. And I'm left, I don't know. Are we supposed to be thinking that he's guilty? It's a very interesting episode because the only kind of evidence that we're getting as viewers is, what the cops are also getting. If that makes
Hmm.
sense, right? So it puts us in the position of assessing and weighing the things that he says and thinking about our suspicions of him, and we're always falling short of proof or anything definitive, and we don't get the confession. And I mean, it does feel like he basically confesses to being attracted to this young
Yes.
girl.
Having
And
having impulses, calls her, I think, his one true love or something.
yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
Um, but did he do anything? Did he rape her? Did he kill her? There's definitely the space for the possibility that the answer is no. You
There
know,
definitely is. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and the one of the other leads that they follow, they have the idea that someone killed her in one of these apartments on the seventh floor, and then went up to the roof and down to the courtyard. And when they search that apartment, it is a mess. It's like one of these situations where there are 10 people sleeping on mattresses on the floor, and there's just stuff everywhere. And they don't find any evidence, I guess. They don't find her earring, they don't find anything else. But almost along these lines of, you're finding too much. It's just like, that's some kind of bodily fluid. Oh,
Yeah.
but also, kind of realistic, I think,
Yeah. It was
Um,
interesting to see. I enjoyed how Bayless and blank on the name, Pemberton, Detective Pemberton. Did I have that right? Um,
Pembleton?
Pemberton, yeah, Detective Pemberton. Um,
Pembleton.
Pemberton. I don't know where I got that from. Pembleton and Bayless, their interaction in this episode, because they really sort of are struggling with their partnership in previous episodes before this. But they get to the point where are they're both convinced of this, and so we've got to make ourselves sort of work in tandem, whether it's good cop, bad cop, or other ways to make this happen. And they as much as I think Moses Gunn was excellent in this episode, the two of them together I thought were just phenomenal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been one of the interesting things throughout the season too, the development of their relationship, their partnership. You know, um, I don't even know exactly what to say about that, but
Yeah.
that it does. It's towards the beginning of the season, Pembleton is really kind of looking down his nose as at Bayless. He wants Lieutenant to take the Adina Watson case away from Bayless and give it to him because
Yeah.
this rookie doesn't know what he's doing and all of that kind of stuff. But it seems like their rapport really grows and mutual
Mhm.
respect grows. And Pembleton himself, over the course of the season, is kind of becoming a little bit more of a team player.
Yeah.
He actually shows up at the bar in the one episode, which he's never done before. And I guess turns down the promotion. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, he got an opportunity for a position that he sort of kept that to himself, but that was my impression that he is wanting to stay with the squad.
Yeah, I don't. wasn't made entirely explicit. And this is one of my questions also is, how much carries over to season two?
Hmm.
And part of why I am curious to continue to season two with you and talk about this show
Yeah.
more again next week. We're going to talk about season two because how much carries over? We're still grappling with the question of, well, what kind of show is this exactly? The first
Yeah.
season's only 9 episodes. Apparently, the second season is only 4 episodes, and I don't know what's up with that. We'll talk about that next week more. But yeah, how much carries over, right? So you mentioned with the Adina Watson case, even like certainly they still care about this.
Hmm.
I think Bayless does mention it in the episode about the dog murder,
Yes.
but I mean, it's more just referring to how this is still something that kind of eats him up inside. He wants to solve that, he wants to get it off the board, but maybe they never will.
Yeah,
And
and that would be very, I think, unique and interesting if, I've not watched ahead to season two, but we see this, they're put in this time constraint of we've got to get this confession in 12 hours. They're in episode six, they don't get it. And then there are some references, as you mentioned, and maybe in seven and eight, this case, but there's no return to it. There's not even a definitive, well, this is not going to be solved. It's just sort of left out there to our imagination of what happens from this point. Presumably, they're still working on it as they do these other things, but there is no, there's no line drawn or finality given to anything to do with this as the season closes.
right, and I think that's realistic. I think that's how it goes, right?
Mhm.
They don't have any new leads. They've gone down all the paths they had available and
Yeah,
didn't solve the case, didn't get it off the board, and so it lingers, you know.
yeah,
And I'll be really curious to see if the show returns to it moving forward. Because they would have to get some kind of fresh lead, and it's possible, you
yeah,
know. But given the what you referred to last week as bleak realism of the
yeah,
show, they'd have to be careful, right? You don't want to just implausibly like, aha, we solved the case,
yeah.
yay.
Just something out of the blue to get it done. I don't anticipate that will happen, but maybe we'll learn more in this very short second season.
Yeah, maybe. You mentioned that well, this is I'm when I say you mentioned, it's in our notes. You put it there. That the first season had 4 Emmy nominations, won 2 Emmys, and it really does seem like the critical acclaim for the show is what saved it. That the executives had some worries, demands, what have you. You want to say anything more about
Yeah,
that at this point?
the ratings for this show, they started off well because they gave it a post Super Bowl slot for the pilot, but then just steep decline into the end of the season. And so the executives were very worried about this. But what helped, as you said, what helped save it is the critical acclaim, it being nominated for 4 Emmys, winning two. But apparently, the NBC executives said if we're going to continue this, we're going to have to make a couple of changes. The two primary ones, which I saw a couple of places, were too many subplots. We got to start focusing on fewer and fewer things. And then also the sort of the quick cut back forth sort of sharpness of moving from scene to scene and even within from shot to shot. So we have need to sort of to smooth that out some. So those were the two major notes apparently. So it'll be interesting to see after watching nine straight episodes and going into these four what has changed here.
Yeah, I don't love those notes.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
either.
not, hopefully it doesn't. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it doesn't ruin the show
Yeah.
because they need 7 seasons. And the season
Yes.
started being 22 episodes long, and overall, people acclaim this show as being really, really good. So, yeah, I'm going to guess that this isn't a Boomtown situation. Have you ever watched Boomtown?
No, I've never seen Boomtown.
I mean, I think the first season of Boomtown is just great. And I don't know if you can find it on Peacock. I should look
Huh.
because it was an NBC show, as I recall. I've got the first season on DVD. It's produced by Graham Yost, um, and who also did like Justified later and is involved with Silo for what it's worth. But the thing in Boomtown is that the story unfolds from different perspectives. So they would say, I think their tagline was something like "See the murder from every point of view," but it wasn't cheesy
Hmm.
like that. And you would go from one character's perspective to another, and there'd be small differences, and then by the end of the episode, it would kind of put things together. And it was really cool, and it was really novel kind of thing. But going into the second season, the executives made them stop doing that, and they also just like got rid of one of the main characters, and I couldn't
Oh,
even make it through the episodes of the second season
oh
that
no.
exist. It was so bad.
I
Um,
I do know that we throughout the course of the show, characters come and go. I think that happens later in seasons. But as you referenced, we're gonna go from 9 episodes to four, and we'll look into before next week why it's just four and what happened there. But then, as you said, we move into 20 to 24 per season for the rest of the duration. So that this show found its footing, at least in terms of critically and ratings, and was given the room to breathe.
yeah, and then it's going to get there. I mean, because that like 22 episode season order is a standard 90s thing, 20 maybe 20 24 sometimes, but that it will get there, I guess, starting in season three. Um, let's talk about some of the familiar faces that show up and
Yeah.
things like that. You put under a show sheet guest stars. I don't know if that's accurate because I don't know
Yeah.
if people knew who these people were at all when they were on the
Yeah,
show.
yeah. These people weren't that famous at this point. Really should be minor day players who became stars later.
Yeah, like Luis Guzman, I don't think anyone knew who he was.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know. I'd have to double check his IMDb, but as I recall, he came to my attention with like Boogie Nights, I think,
Hmm.
in the late
Hmm.
90s. But he shows up in the one episode. Kind of interesting character is this guy who makes cabinets and has a coffin in his apartment and then
Yeah.
apparently um ends his own life, I guess, after
Yeah.
having this
Bolander
conversation.
said, yeah, bad things would happen if you keep this in here. And sure enough, yeah, yeah, Carpenter who got paid in advance for a coffin and the guy never showed up. So yeah, that was quite the
Yeah.
storyline.
And just like steals Bollander's beer.
Yeah.
Um, that was entertaining. I enjoyed that episode. And then like for to circle back around though, where he gets the call and it disrupts his date, and it's because his neighbor is dead. Um, oh, that was good. Edie
Yeah.
Falco. I'm not sure how well known Edie Falco was at this point. I didn't look into it, but
Yeah.
certainly The Sopranos comes half a decade later,
Later.
so I
Yeah.
don't think she was incredibly well known, but she shows up as Officer Chris's wife.
Wife. Yeah. In her best 90s jumpsuit, tracksuit. I mean, love it. Absolutely love
Oh yeah, and
it.
she's great. She's got a recurring role then,
Yes.
right? As does Chris. We haven't hit really on what happened to him other than in your summary. I don't know how much we have to say about that. He's alive, but not doing great and
Yeah.
going to be
Thinks he
blind.
should have
And,
died. Very remorseful. Yes. Or some survivor's remorse there.
and his wife is pregnant and
Yes.
probably we'll see a little bit more of them. I don't know. I don't know how much, but I'm
Yeah.
sure that they won't entirely go away as characters. Who else we got? Larry Gilliard Jr. I'm gonna look this up. It says, that's D'Angelo Barksdale, man.
That's right. Yes, playing a sort of drug runner, drug pusher in the I think episode is Dog and Pony Show, right? He'll become very well known years later.
But I think pretty much just for The Wire, right? I mean, is
I think
he?
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some more people show up who end up in The Wire. The Wire being like the spiritual sequel to this show.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
David Simon is kind of like a staff writer consultant on this show, and then The
Hmm.
Wire is he's the creator and showrunner and all
Maybe.
of
Yeah.
that. So that's not surprising. This guy whose name,
Zelshko Ivanek.
yeah,
I
he's
think.
been
I
in a
think.
lot of things. He always plays a lawyer, I feel
So
like.
that's what I was going to say. So he shows up as a prosecutor here in Homicide: Life on the Street, and from this point forward would be in every legal and political thriller in the history of time since this, right? He's yeah, that's just his character from this point forward.
Yeah, I didn't look it up, and but I was asking myself. I'd have to. quick answer. There's no way to look this up, but you look on IMDb. I couldn't remember if he was in Suits or The Good Wife or both.
Oh
Might
my
be
God.
both. It's like you said, just always a lawyer. Um, so yeah, I mean, with all of these actors, they're definitely familiar faces, but I feel like their breakouts generally are coming after Homicide: Life
Yes.
on the Street. So it's kind of a fun thing to see them with just kind of a small role on the show. You missed, however, the one person who would properly count as a guest star, in my opinion. Your list
All
is
right, who did I
missing someone.
miss?
John Waters.
What episode was that? I must have, well, I certainly did miss him, but which one was it?
He's in the season finale. He's the bartender
Oh, at the very end.
at the very end. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Bolander's in there drowning himself in his misery. I see. Okay, that's the bartender he's talking to.
yeah. John Waters, man. And by this
Yeah.
point, he'd already made any number of films, including Hairspray and
Ah,
all sorts of things. But John Waters, famously from Baltimore, so that fits.
interesting.
I was looking at IMDb about where this was in the arc of his career and so on, and I think he will show up in at least one more episode later or what have you. But now I don't know if your average viewer watching the show in 1993 would have said, "Hey, that's John Waters,"
That's John
because
Waters. Yeah. No, that's an interesting catch though. I remember seeing that scene and Bolander. I guess I just focused on him. You sort of just see the profile of the bartender as he's talking to him. So yeah, it didn't even really register with me. But yeah, that's I like that local connection between him and John Waters. No, missed that completely.
yeah, and also John Waters is 78 years old.
Yes.
Man, still looks good. Let's see. Along similar lines, I did want to talk briefly about the electrolyte neutron magnetic scan test. This is where they use the copy machine and dupe the guy into thinking it's a lie detector. Apparently, David Simon really liked this joke since he did it again in The Wire.
Oh, so this is in The Wire as well? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and now I'm guessing like is this a real thing that he observed the Baltimore police doing? Like, is this a story that's in the book that he wrote? Because I haven't read the book, right? Homicide, a Year on the
That would
Killing Streets.
be absolutely amazing. I mean, every part of that scene is just. I mean, the kid who's getting duped in this, Daniel Baldwin coming in saying, "I told you guys I didn't want to be anywhere near this building when you do this machine again."
Yeah, and Munch makes a joke about a sperm count or whatever,
Yeah,
and it's funny. And if I don't think about it too much, if I start thinking about it too much, I start feeling
yeah.
like I don't like that it's okay for the cops to lie to people.
To just lie like that, yeah.
I don't like that really, but it is.
I
It's
mean,
legal. Cops can
the
lie to you.
ingenuity there to put the paper in the thing and to come out. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. But yeah, I wonder now. I should have looked into it more before we recorded because I'm realizing I really wonder if this is based on a true thing.
Yeah,
Maybe it
yeah,
is, if not, David Simon just thought it was really funny and was like, "Hey, let's do this in The Wire too."
yeah.
Um, but yeah, down the line, I don't remember where it is in The Wire. It might not be till like season five. But
Okay.
it's like basically the same thing, although not quite as uh sophisticated. They didn't go as far as Munch does with the pieces of paper and the handprints that say true and stuff like that. I don't think they took it quite that far, but anyhow,
I was also reminded this week, or I saw this somewhere, that Andre Brower would go on to do many things, but one of them was Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and there is an episode of that show called The Box. That's just a spin in an interrogation room that's apparently an homage to Three Men and Adina with his character.
yeah,
But I found interesting. Yeah,
good episode and good show.
yeah.
And Andre Brower is maybe the best part of that show. Totally. I mean, I was going to say totally different than Pembleton, but is he?
There's a lot of similarities there. Yeah,
uh, there's definitely, just the kind of deadpan,
I'm sure there's somewhere out there, if we go look, there is a piece of content that tries to draw the line of Pendleton becoming this captain as part of the Brooklyn police force. Somewhere out there, someone has connected some dots to make them the same person.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. I'm sure someone has. You're right, but
Yeah.
I don't know how plausible that is. Um, and why did he change his name to Raymond
Yeah.
Holt at some point? And so on. But um, let's see here. I guess the stuff we have remaining kind of goes together. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting with some of this commentary on politics, and then I guess the commentary on history or that kind of through line is a
There's
similar
just so
sort of
much
thing.
of that, especially in these last six episodes. I mean, just it seems like there was these stories about Lincoln, Spiro Agnew, some as they're having a discussion about drugs, particularly the legalization of marijuana. Munch goes into the history of hemp and its use during World War II. There just must have been in that writer's room just sort of a real deep sense or love of sort of history and political history that they tried to weave into the conversation between these detectives.
Yeah, I mean, it's that the biggest running through line is Crossetti's obsession with the Lincoln assassination.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's something of a conspiracy theorist about it, and
Oh
I'm not
yeah,
entirely
every
sure
all
John Wilkes Booth did it.
his whole cabinet was in on it, or it was the Secretary of the War that did it. Yeah,
Yeah. Then they end up going to Washington, D.C. in the one episode because to visit the uh, consulate, right? Is that the right word? The Chinese
yes, that's
consulate.
right. Yeah,
Um, that was kind of interesting, right? And realizing, this was coming out in 1993, Tiananmen Square was only 1989.
that's right.
So in the context of that episode, not that long ago, but the show's just kind of like butting up against the geopolitics of that, and then they have
Mhm.
the conversation with the Secret Service guy, and just
Yeah, there's
at the end
some
of
real
that,
approaching the line, but not crossing the line in that in that episode. As I'm sure we go back and watch TV in the 80s and 90s, you'd probably see a lot of like you would have never gotten the Americans in the 1980s, right?
yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I guess broadly speaking, my take on it is just that it's showing an interest in social commentary
Yes,
through the lens of this show and not just murder mystery case of the week stuff,
exactly. Yeah.
which is also, to my recollection, a bit distinctive in terms
Mhm.
of something coming out in 1993. You don't find any social commentary really in like Murder She Wrote.
No, no,
Um,
you don't. Or the
Columbo, maybe in
yeah,
Columbo,
that's right.
there kind of is a political edge to Columbo, which I
Yeah,
don't think I quite thought about at the time, but it's noteworthy that Columbo is always like
that
investigating rich people.
is true. Oh, that is true.
Um, but even then, it's maybe more implicit. And here,
Yeah.
I don't know. Did any of this feel shoehorned into you, or did it all feel natural for Munch to like?
No, and even you saying that about Columbo always investigating rich people makes me think of, and we just sort of come full circle here to Three Men and Adina when Arista Tucker is talking about him and his fiance visiting the restaurant in New York,
Mm,
and it was for all the 500s, all the really rich people, and they couldn't get a table, and so he fights with the maitre d and spits in his face. But all of it, to your question, seemed to not be forced, not be we're trying to tell a story or make a point, but really we're just trying to integrate it into either the cases or in many of these situations into the lives or natural conversations of this is what it's like to be a detective on this squad. So this is our day-to-day world.
yeah. Sometimes we argue about whether Spiro Agnew should have a bust in the
That's
museum.
right.
That's kind of funny. The one case is a murder apparently over this issue. Oh man. Um, and the smoking thing, I was imagining in the last episode. Imagining a Zoomer watching this. So it was like 20 years old. And just be like, what are you, because you have the scene where Howard she's like asking for the creation of a no smoking section in the precinct and
Yeah.
gets told no. Yeah.
Yes, for those that were not aware, all restaurants, most office buildings, every public sort of space would have a smoking and a non-smoking section, and yeah, there wasn't very much in terms of the non-smoking area, it seemed like.
It's crazy to me in terms of thinking back on my life and the world in relation to this, how fast things happened,
Yeah, yeah.
because this is realistic. And also, and she's smoking in the courthouse while she's waiting to testify. And that's 1993, and yeah, that's what it was like.
Sure, sure.
What
Yeah,
it was
why
like.
not?
Going to McDonald's and they got those little metal ashtrays. Um, but by the end of the 90s, you started getting some indoor smoking bans and things like that.
That's
The
right.
first
That's right.
ones,
A lot in New
um,
York. Yeah, started in the big cities. Yeah.
and then by what the mid aughts, it had really spread all over
Yes.
the place. I don't know everywhere. I don't know everywhere. I haven't looked into all the details. I imagine there are still some places in Kentucky or whatever where they don't have laws like this, but I could be wrong. Even I don't know. I'm just imagining there might be certain
Yeah.
pushback in certain states, but um, yeah. And oh, I forgot to look this up. This is like super minor. I just want to double check before I say something. I meant to do this earlier. Um, yeah, the title of episode 9, "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," is also the title of the very first episode of Mad Men.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have
Um,
much to say about that,
I wonder. I
but
wonder.
I don't know if it was. I mean, it would have to be in the direction of Mad Men, kind of alluding to Homicide: Life on the Street, but equally, it might just be coincidence that both shows
Yeah.
are using this phrase.
Yeah. So the titles of the episodes on Homicide: Life in the Street seem to often be a euphemism or cliche or a derivative of a cliche. You know, they change a word or a letter or something. So yeah, that's often what they would use.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an idiom, but I don't know. It's just something I noticed when I was looking at the episode titles. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the name of the Mad Men pilot, and it is. And lots of stuff in that episode about smoking and quitting smoking, and yeah, I don't know. Other things you want to hit on before we wrap up here?
No, I think that's good. I do think it will be a good idea, knowing what we've seen and heard about what this show was in season one, what quote unquote notes they got in advance of season two. What changes in these 4 episodes? And they change for the better or change for the worse? I guess we'll see this week.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. So, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week talking about season 2, Homicide: Life on the Street, which is apparently only 4 episodes. And we've yet to really research why it's only 4 episodes. I mean, that's really short. Season 4.
Yeah,
This isn't the UK, for God's sakes.
that's
Um,
that's right.
but anyway, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do consider leaving us a good rating, review on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, follow TV Obsessive on social media, look for TV Obsessive, check out tvobsessive.com, read some articles, poke around, have fun, and we'll be back next week.
All right, looking forward to it.